Hey everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to The Division 2. And today we have another Ubisoft update to go over. If you've been out of the loop, we've been following this saga with Ubisoft for quite some time. It began a number of years ago with widespread rumors of acquisition or a total shutdown, that being due to their continual poor performance as an overall company. Then last year we learned of Tencent essentially bailing them out with a €1 billion cash injection, and that was followed by the news of a big organizational restructuring that they planned to do, with the goal of essentially making sure that they did not get back into that same position. Well, today we have that news. Ubisoft has unveiled their new operating model. They've announced an array of news that has some of the potential to be good, but a lot of it is bad as well. So, as per usual, this is a Division-focused channel. You are likely going to be hearing Ubisoft's name in the news a lot this week, but in this video, I'm going to try and cut through the noise and let you know everything you need to about what is happening as it pertains to the future of the Division specifically. So, let's get straight to it. If you'd like to stay in the loop on things like this and know what is going on behind the scenes, then be sure to subscribe for more. A huge shout out and thank you to our channel members. As always, your support directly enables me to continue making videos like these, so thank you so much for that. But without further ado, let's get into all of it. Alright, so while you're going to likely be seeing a lot of articles passed around online recapping some of this news, the source of it all is from this press release that Ubisoft put out this morning, alongside an accompanying slideshow that kind of condenses some of the information. These are the two sources that I'm going to be pulling from for this video, and as we go over all of this, I will link both of these things in the description of this video in case you want to go and check them out for yourself. But yeah, this is coming straight from the source. So, as you can see, this reads, Ubisoft announces a major organizational, operational, and portfolio reset to reclaim creative leadership and restore sustainable growth. This includes a new operating model centered around 5 specialized creative houses to support Ubisoft's strategic focus, a refocused portfolio with a meaningful reworked roadmap leading to significantly revised fiscal year 26 financials, and an accelerating of cost reduction initiatives to right-size the new organization and improve structural efficiency. So, again, we're going to cover it all, but that is the overall headline. And before we get into the details, I want to first go over this big quote and statement that was made by Yves Guillemot, who is the founder and CEO of Ubisoft. It's a little bit lengthy, but I think it prefaces a lot of what we're going to look at quite clearly. So, let's go through it. He says, on the one hand, the AAA industry has become persistently more selective and competitive with rising development costs and greater challenges in creating brands. On the one hand, exceptional AAA games, when successful, have more financial potential than ever. In this context, today we are announcing a major reset built to create the conditions for a return to sustainable growth over time. We are transforming Ubisoft's operating model to produce exceptional quality games on the 2 core pillars of our strategy: open-world adventures and games as a service native experiences. At the center of this transformation are our creative houses, integrated business units now combining production and publishing and therefore unifying the gamer relationship. Each one is built around a clear genre and brand focus with full responsibility and financial ownership led by dedicated leadership teams. It is a radical move relying on a more decentralized creative organization with faster decision-making and best-in-class cross-functional core services supporting and serving each creative house. To put the creative houses in the best conditions to succeed, we decided to refocus our portfolio with a meaningfully revised 3-year roadmap and accelerate our cost reduction initiatives to right-size the organization. We will discontinue several projects currently in development and provide additional time to certain games to ensure enhanced quality and maximize long-term value. We will also selectively close several studios and continue restructurings throughout the group. While these decisions are difficult, they are necessary for us to build a more focused, efficient, and sustainable organization over the long term. And I just want to clarify now, I'm sure some people will see these things about discontinuing games, closing studios, and think, is the Division imminently at risk? They do get into detail later on, so just hold off. But yeah, overall, Ubisoft is going to be going through a lot of transformation in the coming months and year. Finally, he says, taken together, these measures mark a decisive turning point for Ubisoft and reflect our determination to confront challenges head-on to reshape the group for the long term. The portfolio refocus will have a significant impact on the group's short-term financial trajectory, particularly in fiscal years 26 and 27, but this reset will strengthen the group and enable it to renew with sustainable growth and robust cash generation. Ubisoft is entering a new phase, one designed to reclaim creative leadership and build value for players and stakeholders over the long term. Okay, so I know that was a lot of words, but I do think that it sets us up quite well for what we're about to cover. The first thing that they really dive into here is what exactly these creative houses are going to be, which we did talk about in a prior video. They said that they were setting these up, but today we now know where the division falls under this new leadership. They stress right here that this new organization and model will start operating early April, and they provide a chart right here which we can take a little bit better look at in the slideshow. So let's switch over here and scroll right to this. So this is Ubisoft's new model. At the top, you have Ubisoft HQ. This is corporate, right? It says they focus on vision, strategy, and capital allocation. Right beneath that, you then have the creative houses. It says the creative and operational driving forces, including dedicated lead studios. So there are 5 of these in total. The first one is Vantage Studios. You may remember that we talked about this in a prior video. This is the result of the Tencent deal where they gave Ubisoft over €1 billion, and in return, Ubisoft spun off the Assassin's Creed, Rainbow Six, and Far Cry IPs to a new company, which is Vantage Studios. Ubisoft owns, I believe, about 75% of that, whereas Tencent owns 25%. So that was its whole own deal. And again, Tencent is only involved with those specific IPs. But today they announced these 4 other creative houses, which the division is involved in, but this is all happening still directly under the Ubisoft umbrella. So we have the creative houses. Beneath that is then the creative network. It says a network of studios partnering with all creative houses to provide best-in-class production capacity. Essentially what this sounds like is they are rebranding what Ubisoft's old model was, where they had a lot of support studios around the world that would partner up with these lead teams like Massive on The Division or Star Wars Outlaws, and it would help those games achieve the aggressive timelines that they were targeting. So that support network is now going to be known as the Creative Network. And then finally, they will have a team or set of studios that is dedicated to core services. And it says these provide shared, standardized, and scalable services that enable the brains and projects teams to focus on their core mission. So that includes production services, technology and infrastructure, and business operations and services. If we move down here just a little bit, you can see exactly what these creative houses are going to be. So Ubisoft says that their 2 focuses are on open world adventure games and games as a service native experiences. The first creative house, again, we've covered Vantage Studios. It says scaling and extending Ubisoft's largest and established franchises to turn them into annual billionaire brands. And that includes, as we've covered, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six. But here we now got the confirmation that the division has fallen into Creative House number 2, which says it offers competitive and cooperative shooter experiences. And as you can see, the included brands are Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, and The Division. Now, at least from a fundamental and thematic standpoint, I think this very much makes sense to group those IPs together. They're all Tom Clancy. They all have generally similar themes. And so again, just from a surface level, I think this seems to be a good grouping of brands. What is unclear for now, though, and they do not elaborate on this anywhere in the, news and release that I've seen, is who the lead studio of this creative house is going to be. They say that each house has a lead studio. Is that Massive Entertainment working on The Division? Is that somebody working on Ghost Recon or Splinter Cell? We don't know. Perhaps over time we will get additional details about the leadership structure of each of these houses, but again, for right now, we do not have that information. And as I said, there are then 3 additional creative houses, each with their own focuses and brands, but for the division's sake, we care about creative house number 2, as that is what we are in. So, you may be thinking, well, that's great that we now know this, but what does this even mean, right? What is a creative house? What does this new structure actually look like? Well, they outline it a little bit. If we switch back to the press release and continue moving down, there was a lot of information here about all of this stuff, but this section right here gives us some information. And my outlook on this whole creative house structure is one of cautious optimism. It sounds like there is potential for this to maybe be beneficial for the division and how it operates. But again, we're really just going to have to wait and see. It says, one of the pillars of the creative house structure is full creative and brand responsibility, as well as financial ownership. Each creative house will have end-to-end responsibility for its portfolio, overseeing the full creative and brand scope from development to publishing. That includes branding, marketing, and sales go-to-market strategy. They will also be financially accountable, both in terms of P&L cash generation. This structure will sharpen strategic focus, reinforce execution discipline, and ensure that investment decisions decisions will be taken closer to where value is created. My understanding of this, and do keep in mind that I'm not a business major in any way, shape, or form, but essentially what I take away from this is that no longer will it be the case that Skull and Bones doing poorly for Ubisoft as a whole has any impact really on the Division. The only properties and projects that Division has to worry about is what is within its own creative house. So in this case, Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, and Us. The benefit to this, at least what they're outlining here, is that now each of these houses will be fully responsible for branding and marketing. So in theory, this would allow Massive and the creative house leadership to give the Division more autonomy in how they want to handle news reveals and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they are accountable for their own financial targets. There's going to be less bailout from the corporate structure. And as it says at the bottom, the model also enhances visibility into development pipelines, milestones, and key risks, supporting more informed decision-making throughout development cycles. So, for now, that is about everything that we know about the creative house structure itself. Again, as they outlined, this will not go into effect until April. So at that point, maybe we will get a bit of a better idea about who the leadership structure is for each of these houses, how exactly the Division will fit into that new paradigm, but that is what we know for now. That is only about half of the relevant news that we have to go over today, though, because what they also go on to outline is how their roadmap is changing and how they're going to make some cost cutting to the overall Ubisoft business. So let's cover some of those things next. If we go back to the slideshow, they kind of present it in a more digestible format. So they say, in the context of a persistently more selective market and as part of the finalization of the new operating model, Ubisoft has conducted a thorough review of its content pipeline over December and January. This has led to the strategic decision to refocus its portfolio, reallocate resources, and comprehensively revise the roadmap over the next 3 years to meet new enhanced quality and more selective portfolio prioritization criteria. This is the big part right here. As a consequence, the group has decided to discontinue 6 games. That includes the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake, as well as 4 unannounced titles, including 3 new IPs and a mobile title. So, again, you might see headlines out there saying Ubisoft has canceled a bunch of games. From what we know right now, none of those include Division projects. Could that change tomorrow, next week, next month? Yes, it could, but for right now, we do not have any indication of that. They go on to say that they have allocated additional development time to 7 games. This includes the unannounced title that was initially planned for fiscal year 26 that has been delayed to fiscal 27. So, from what I've been hearing, this title that they're referring to right here is the Assassin's Creed Black Flag remake that was going to be coming out in the next month or two here. That has now been pushed to the next fiscal year. And keep in mind that Ubisoft's fiscal years begin on April 1st of any given year. So that has been delayed from the next 1 or 2 months here to sometime after April 1st of 2026. But yeah, they say that they have allocated additional development time to 7 games. Does this potentially include the Division Resurgence or the Division 3? We have no idea. It's important to keep in mind that Ubisoft has a lot of projects in development. They're a huge company, and there are more than likely at least 7 games that are slated to come out before the Division 3. Think about the various Assassin's Creed projects they're working on. Think about the next Ghost Recon, the next Far Cry. So again, as of right now, there's just really no telling if this does include the Division 3, but as I stated in my Division 3 recap video for 2026, it would not shock me if the release date for that ends up being 2029. Previously, myself and a lot of people were thinking 2028, and I do still think that is probably the most likely release window, but what we've seen Ubisoft doing and what they confirm here is that they are giving games more time to polish, more time to be in the oven, because they really just cannot afford for games to come out anymore, have a bunch of bugs, not really be finished, because that severely hurts them when it comes to their revenue. So they say that this overall roadmap restructure covers the next 3 years. That would include, the general release window that we're expecting for the Division 3. So we will have to wait and see what that means. But they say that the reshaped portfolio is designed to best position the creative houses for success. And again, if you're overly worried about the Division being majorly impacted by that, it is in one of the major new creative houses. So while that is not a guarantee that bad things could not happen to the Division projects in the future, as of right now, it does not look like that's the case. So their future roadmap in games is one part of this overall restructuring, but we also need to look at what they're planning to do with these studios that are under their umbrella. We covered recently that there were layoffs experienced at Massive and Ubisoft Stockholm. There have been many layoffs across the Ubisoft company as a whole in the past 2 to 3 years, and unfortunately, they confirm here that that is not the end. So accelerating of cost reduction initiatives as part of the transformation of its operating model to improve structural efficiency, restore a much higher level of organizational agility and the right size cost base. So they say they're going to achieve these reductions through a strict hiring discipline across all functions. They're going to be implementing further restructurings, which means layoffs. And the group also continues to consider potential asset divestitures. To the best of my knowledge, we haven't really seen them do that yet. And for any who don't know, what that means would be like selling off different IPs or assets that they own. A lot of people had said for a long time that they want Massive and the Division to go to someone else, that they wish Ubisoft would sell them off. Maybe that's in the cards. I'm not so sure, but they say that that is something they're considering across the board. The big one here, though, is the further restructurings, right? We talked just the other day about how Massive experienced a series of layoffs. And as we heard Eve's comment on in the intro statement that he gave, they said that they're going to continue closing studios over the next period of time to achieve their goals. Does that create concern for the Division? Well, they say as part of these efforts, the group has already taken decisive actions. That includes the closure of the Halifax mobile studio and Stockholm studio. This last part is very surprising. If you watched my video the other day, the news was that 55 positions got laid off between Stockholm and Massive, but it did not mention the complete closure of the Stockholm studio. So I'm not entirely sure if that is breaking news as of today. I did do some brief research, and I'm not signed into LinkedIn here, but you can see behind this little blurb that it confirms that the Stockholm studio was opened in 2017, so it's a very new studio. It also only had between 51 and 200 employees, whereas Massive, at least before all of this stuff, had at least over 700. So a relatively small studio, and just so you know, they were not involved with the Division in any way, shape, or form, but apparently they have been completely closed as of the action that was already taken. Additionally, though, it says restructurings at Abu Dhabi, Red Links, and Massive. So if you want to find a silver lining in this, you could say, well, they've said that they've already taken some decisive action. If they were going to turn around and close Massive altogether, which I don't think would happen, but if they were, they likely would not have gone through the trouble of laying certain people off. But again, that is just in the right now. Who knows, 6 months, a year from now. This is the last really bit of important information here, though. It says the current cost reduction program of at least 100 million in fixed cost savings versus fiscal year 25 has now been targeted to be fully achieved by March, 1 year ahead of its initial target. But here's what they say. Building on this momentum, the group is defining a third and final phase of its program to reduce fixed cost base by an additional 200 million over the next 2 years. This brings the total reduction in fixed costs since 2023, or fiscal year 2023, to around 500 million, and bringing total fixed cost to 1.25 billion euro, all that stuff. This is the figure right here, though, 200 million over the next 2 years. The stuff that we've seen them doing now, at least over the last year, I would say is what they were doing to target a 100 million reduction. They now want to double that over the next 2 years. And as they said, that is going to be achieved through hiring, reductions. They're going to restructure or close studios and lay people off, and consider asset divestiture. What this means, at least what my take on it is that you are going to continue seeing major layoffs and closures over the next 2 years for Ubisoft. Clearly, they do not seem to be in a position to want to sell the studio off. The Guillemets do not want to lose control of the company, and they certainly don't want to shut down. And so to avoid those things, they're going to be downsizing a lot. Does this necessarily mean that the Division and Massive could be impacted? Maybe. We just don't know. Again, I lean towards saying no because I think Massive has a very key position, if you look at the total Ubisoft landscape, if you will. But 200 million is a lot, and I think they're going to feel that across the entire company. The thing that analysts have been saying with Ubisoft for even over 10 years at this point is that they were a huge company. Before all of these layoffs began, they had around, I want to say, 20,000 employees. And when you're talking about a global company, that is just a huge amount of people to try and oversee, to make sure efficiency stays high, all of that. And so while people have been saying that downsizing is the route that they need to go, at this point, you can't really do that without closing studios and laying people off, stuff that we don't like to see. Again, do I think Massive and the Division is at the front line of risk there? I don't, personally, but I could absolutely see studios like Red Storm being on the chopping block. I could see Bucharest, who provides the majority of current day support for Division 2, being at risk, given they don't seem to be leading any one of these projects under the Creative House structure. There's a lot of uncertainty moving forward, and I think that's going to be felt. All right, the final thing that I then want to look at is if we go back to the press release here and scroll way down, they basically say that because of all of this news and all of these changes, they're going to have to reformat basically their predictions for bookings in the next year, and they note that their next investor meeting is coming up very soon on February 12th. So I imagine that that is going to be the next date where we hear more about this overall transformation, potential closures, potential transparency on the leadership structure for these creative houses. So stay tuned, and I will keep you in the loop with anything new that we learn. So there you have it, everybody. That is the news. At this point, who truly knows where things are going to go from here? I think, as I said earlier on, I am cautiously optimistic that this new creative house structure may allow for Massive and the Division to get a bit more autonomy and make better decisions that cater for what our community wants and needs. But we're really just going to have to wait and see how that actually goes. But there's no other way around it. I am nervous for Ubisoft as a whole. They want to reduce operating costs by a further 200 million over the next 2 years. That is a lot. And while I would like to say that I think Massive and the Division is relatively safe, I've said that before, given their integration with the Snowdrop game engine development and Ubisoft Connect. We will see, and only time will really tell. At this point, I would love to get any and all thoughts that you all may have about this major news that we got today. Let me hear all of it. I eagerly await reading through your thoughts. That's all I've got. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! Haha! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go.
And